Hello and welcome to It's a Code You, mental health support for those working in healthcare. This is a podcast created for healthcare employees to explore not only issues relating to mental and emotional health, but also unique challenges that those working in healthcare are faced with. Your hosts are Adina Tucker, a licensed clinical social worker with Dartmouth Health, and Jennifer Hinsey, an MSW also with Dartmouth Health. Welcome to It's a Code You. For the months of March and April, we will be focusing on the idea of finding balance in an unbalanced world. In this episode, we will focus on using balance in your communication. There are lots of ways to find balance in communication, but for this episode, we are going to focus on balance in listening when communicating. And this concept can be useful in both personal and professional relationships. And we'll talk about the idea of balance in communication and then go through some of the skills you can use to achieve this. We'll start with personal relationships and then we'll also discuss balance in the workplace.
Now, trouble communicating it's a popular reason for couples to seek couples therapy. However, it can impact families and friendships just as much. Maybe you've been there. I know I have. Now, within romantic relationships, we know that both verbal and nonverbal communication can impact relationship satisfaction, right? Now, part of the idea of balance within communication lies in the balance of using positive nonverbal communication, like turning towards each other instead of away, or loving affection with positive verbal communication as well. Now, there's a quote, maybe you've heard of it, but it's a pretty common one that says you should do more listening than talking. And most of the research out there confirms that, especially when it comes to our personal relationships. Listen to understand, not to refute, not to defend, but to understand what the person is trying to tell you. When we can understand someone, it really allows us to be more empathetic and to understand where they're coming from. And that helps us build connection and helps us to understand our own role in whatever it is that they're bringing up. There's also this idea of listening being something that we actively do, and that involves being curious. If the person you're in any kind of relationship with expresses something to you, instead of assuming what they mean, just ask them what they mean. So, for example, you could say, "Hey, I want to make sure I understand what you're trying to communicate to me. Did you mean XYZ?" So you could rephrase what they just communicated to you to make sure that you're clear on what they're trying to say. This does two things. It gives the other person the chance to either confirm or correct your understanding, but it also communicates to them that you really care about what they are telling you and that you really do want to understand them. It's a wonderful way to make someone feel seen by being very curious about what it is they're trying to help you know.
So now we're going to talk about a common imbalance, and it is over talking versus under listening. So, over talking is pretty much what it sounds like. One person is dominating the conversation. Maybe they feel more comfortable with self expression. They could also have a history of feeling misunderstood, or maybe they're just more extroverted, or it could even be that they feel their point of view is more important. But there's different reasons for people doing it. It's not always that they don't care what you have to say. There could be some other underlying things. And then under listening is when one person is distracted or not interested or maybe even preoccupied with their own thoughts. But both of those imbalances can lead to feelings of being unheard or frustration. And now we are going to go over some tips for communicating with your partner, friend, or family member. So, first, be clear and honest. Try to be as straightforward as possible. Not only does this reduce the likelihood of there being a misunderstanding, but will also increase your feelings of being heard and understood. So try to put the focus on you. I feel blank instead of you make me feel blank. Sometimes when we communicate in a way that puts the responsibility of our feelings on someone else, that can add to the likelihood of them becoming defensive and just not even listening to anything we have to say. Try not to be vague, especially if you're giving negative feedback. So, as an example, instead of saying, you never spend time with me, you could give a specific instance. I felt hurt because I really wanted to spend time with you yesterday. Feeling emotional is normal when communicating about your feelings with someone that you care about, but try to stay calm. It will help you to not get defensive and to really try to hear your loved one or friend, and it will make them more open to hearing you. And remember, if you and the other person in the relationship try to view your relationship as a team versus two opposing sides, things can also feel more balanced. Try to avoid over talking, which is what we talked about a second ago. So try to recognize if this is something that you do. It could be that you fear you won't be heard, or you may just be unaware of how much you're talking. I am guilty of this. I overtalk a lot. And for me, it is because mine personally is a misunderstanding thing where I've in the past. So it's like in my brain, I'm like, if I explain it 10 different ways, one of those is going to make sense. So that's something that I have to work on and be very aware of. There are some ways you can stop over talking if you know that you do this. You can pause and reflect to give the other person time to speak, and that allows for that balance to occur. You can ask open ended questions and try not to ask pointed questions that are obviously just trying to drive your point home. The open ended questions also help you go for more of an understanding of what they're saying versus a tit for tat type of situation. And then just be aware of how much you're talking. If you've been leading most of the conversation, try to just give the other person time to speak.
Those are great tips. And yes, I think probably every one of us can come away with something useful, maybe even about the over talking point. Sometimes, right, we often think, well, I'm not trying to do that, or do I do that? But we could have had relationships, personal relationships in the past where we were conditioned to really have to over talk in a sense in order to feel like our partner or our friend or whoever family member was actually hearing us, right? So, interesting ways we pick up these bad communication habits or less than desirable communication habits, but always time to practice new ones, right? Now, we're going to talk about active listening. And so, another piece of balancing communication is listening, and active listening is certainly key to this. When we are actively listening, we are really in tune with what is being said, but also we're in tune with any nonverbal communication. So, here are some tips for practicing active communication. Try to maintain eye contact. You can also use verbal affirmations, saying things like, I understand or I see. And you can reflect to the other person that you're invested in what they're trying to communicate with you. Also, be careful not to assume. Reflect back what you've heard. So, for example, so you are saying you felt XYZ, right? Or if you're not sure what they're trying to convey to you, you can ask for that clarification. You could say, for example, I'm not sure I'm understanding you. So please clarify for me, did you mean XYZ? By reflecting and asking for clarification, it shows that we do respect those that we have relationships with and how they feel matters to us. And above all, understanding them and their experience is important to us. Empathy really is so important in a relationship, and it's something that we can use while we're communicating. When we're empathetic while we're communicating, it creates connection and it allows our partners to feel seen and validated. It also creates emotional safety within a relationship.
Another thing that is helpful is to avoid passive listening. So we talked about active listening. So what does passive listening look like? So don't do the thing that we sometimes can do when we're talking to a relative, like, okay. That shows that we're not really paying attention and we're just trying to move it along. Try to put your phone away or turn off the TV so you can really be present. Be curious and show that you're interested in what the other person is trying to communicate. That again just shows that that helps the other person to feel heard, and it also makes sure that you're understanding. what they're trying to communicate and takes away the makes it less likely that you're going to misunderstand something and then that would cause an argument. Give feedback, let them know your thoughts, unless the other person has specifically asked you to just allow them to express their feelings, which can happen. And so, in that instance, I would just recommend coming back at a later time to ask it would be okay to express some thoughts about the previous conversation because that kind of honors what they need, but it also gives you a chance to express your needs. Another recommendation and thing that could be very helpful is to have regular check ins in a romantic relationship and having regular check-ins, they don't have to be long, but regular is the key word about how communication is going or even preparing for a week or a month coming up, depending on how often, if you do them weekly or monthly, and reflecting on the previous week. It keeps you both engaged in your mutual goals. And you can also find out what's not working and tweak things before it becomes an issue, or even find out what is working so that you can do more of that. Oftentimes something may be like, "Oh, I didn't really like that," so we don't say anything, and then it happens more and more, and then 2 months down the road, we blow up about it. But when we're checking in with each other and saying like, "How hey, like, what do you have coming up? Is there anything you need for support? Or is there anything that I've done that's made you feel really loved? Or is there anything you need that I'm not giving you?" Just having those check-ins and having a space for it can also take away some of the kinda sprinkled in things throughout the week where maybe you get derailed with things. And having feedback from each other about how things are going or what each other needs, that's a big part of maintaining that balance in a relationship. It's kind of like how you take your car in to get the oil changed and tune-ups. It's just very similar. Another key thing that creates balance and communication in your relationships is to make sure you're communicating the positives, not just the negatives. So showing appreciation and even acknowledging effort to change something that's been an issue can go a long way in making your partner or the other person in the relationship feel seen and appreciated. A lot of times we could say, I have this issue with you, and the other person can be like, yeah, I'll work on it. But then even if we see effort, we may not say, hey, I really appreciate how you sat down and talked with me when you got home from work for a few minutes or whatever it is. And so then the other person can sometimes feel like frustrated, like I'm doing all these things and it doesn't even matter. And so I think positive feed we're so quick sometimes to say like, I don't like the way you're doing this, or like you hurt my feelings, but we don't I feel like we don't always come with like, hey, I really appreciate how you showed up this way or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Now, the way we communicate in those personal relationships, it certainly matters. But what about the workplace? What about how we're communicating there? Well, it's not that different than how you communicate with someone that you have a personal or romantic relationship with. To be most successful, you want to be able to express your own thoughts and needs while also allowing space for others' perspectives. So, some key components of balanced communication at work are active listening. So, we just went over that a few minutes ago. Being clear in your communication, being confident in expressing how you feel while also respecting others, being able to provide both positive and negative feedback. Also, recognizing that there are different communication styles for different people. So, if you manage others, it's helpful to learn what works best for everyone. Or if you're part of a team, knowing how the members of your team best communicate and being able to adjust to that. Being open to other viewpoints, being mindful about your tone, being direct when addressing concerns or issues. There's lots of great benefits of having balanced communication in the workplace, just like in our personal or romantic relationships. But in the workplace, those benefits include better teamwork, better productivity, creating a much more positive work environment, and building strong relationships.
I agree. And I think what's interesting or what I've noticed, I feel like I've had all kinds of varied and, I've started working when I was 15. So I've had a lot of different kinds of jobs. But I think one thing I've really noticed is that a lot of people will mimic the way that they communicate either poorly or well in their like familial relationships or in their personal relationships in the workplace. Like one of my first experiences was in high school, and the manager, I worked at not that this matters to anything, but I worked at like a fun park that had like go-karts and a snack bar and laser tag, stuff like that. Anyway, the manager was like always talking about other employees and like complaining about their work, but not to them. And I just remember thinking, like, that's so unprofessional. And also, how does the person know that there's something they need to improve on if you're not directly communicating that with them? And then there wasn't a situation where it also like there was positive feedback when you did do something well either. So and I think it's one of those things where I think especially in work, I think we've all worked places where you only hear the negative feedback if you do get any, you don't get the positive feedback. And that really, because a lot of us, I feel like most people like really want to do a good job at whatever they're doing. So it's it is one of those things where if you feel like your efforts are noticed and appreciated, like that makes you want to show up differently. So I think that, and even with coworkers, one thing I've tried to do is like really make sure that like my coworkers know how much I appreciate because I've been really lucky in like having work situations where I've learned a lot from other people and they've really and we help each other out and stuff. And so it's really nice to make sure that you let the people you work with know, hey, I appreciate you.
I think it's pretty common when the topic of improving communication comes up, folks immediately think about, right, their personal romantic relationships. And rarely do we hear or get training on workplace communication and how to better that or improve that. And I think, especially now, maybe more than ever, it really would be a great benefit to all to learn how to communicate well amongst our coworkers, right? There's a lot of differences that we all bring in personally to work, right? And sometimes events outside of work or in work, right? Large systemic changes can really exacerbate what maybe communication issues are already there. So I think being someone who is skilled in good, healthy communication with others can really just be a benefit to your team as a whole.
How and if we communicate matters not only in our personal lives, but in our professional lives as well. And by employing these strategies, you can have a more balanced communication in your personal relationships, but also at work. And if you haven't already, please subscribe or leave us a rating and review. If you have any feedback, questions, or comments, please email us at dhbhs.media@hitchcock.org. And we really appreciate you listening and have a wonderful day.